Parental alienation is a controversial topic. Some argue that it's not a real thing and that it's used to advance certain agendas. But let me tell you, I have personally experienced alienation in my family, and I have worked with countless clients, mothers and fathers who have been alienated from their children as a result of divorce. And more often than not, more parties beyond the spouses alone are involved in this. I'm Sinta Ebersohn from Get Up and Grow. I'm also the founder of Fair Divorce, and that is why I talk about these topics. With me here is Hannah Corey to share her own personal experience with us. Hannah, thank you so much for agreeing to talk to me, and welcome here.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure.
So please tell us, all the way from Florida in the USA, your story and what happened to you.
Yeah, so right now I'm 23 years old. I'm the second oldest of 10 children. And so there's a lot of us. And I felt like I carried like a very heavy, burden within the family, just helping things run smoothly. And, when you have that amount of kids, the oldest children tend to become like additional parents in a way. And so 6 of those siblings are my biological siblings. And our mother is who I consider the alienator in my story. And my dad is the one who was alienated from us. And so all of this happened back when I was 10 years old, when my parents got divorced. So they announced their divorce in the springtime, I think maybe May of 2011. And the last time that I saw my dad was in September of that same year. And so from May to September was kind of the timeline that my mom had from, us living together as one family to the point where we had moved, and I did not see him again until I was 18 years old. So when I turned 18, I reached back out to him. I had been under the impression that there was a restraining order in place, and that was something that my mom had lied about. It was not true. And so I didn't think I was even allowed to talk to him until I was 18 years old. So when I was 18, I reached back out to him, and he and I now have a very good relationship, and we've been fully, reintegrated into each other's lives. My mother, however, has, cut me off, and so I haven't actually spoken to her at length since I was 18 as well. So I kind of switched parents in a way. So yeah, that's the basic, gist of what happened. Something that is just very unique to my situation, me specifically, that happened was that when I was a toddler, my dad was in the military, and I was in the hospital. I was very, very sick, and they ended up finding out that I had an attachment disorder to my dad, and it essentially caused my body to shut down. And so he was able to get an honorable discharge from the military so he could come home. And after that, I was fine. So when the alienation first started happening in, May, was when I started to experience symptoms of feeling sick, having a lot more anxiety, being very, very weak. I was extremely light for my age. I was a very small child. And those were just kind of some really big concerns that were noticed about my health, just kind of declining as, my dad was sort of distanced from our life. And those symptoms continued into my adulthood. So now I'm dealing with chronic conditions that are a result of the separation with my dad. My mom was aware of these things, and she chose to alienate in spite of those things, with the risk that, I could, become very, very ill as a result of that. And so it's just, the alienation itself it was very real for me. It's very unfortunate because it's affected my mind and my body, and so it's something I'm really working to recover from, and it's going to take me a very, very long time. And obviously with dealing with some chronic issues, I'll never actually fully recover from that. And so it's just really unfortunate to see those side effects and what was done to a child at the time. How it seems like at the time she's not a healthy person, but at the time I do think she was trying to protect us. And when you when you separate from somebody, when you're in the middle of a divorce, I think it can be very easy as a parent to see like, this person is not good for me, this person is dangerous for me, and, you know, in a way toxic for me. So therefore they must be dangerous for my children and toxic for my children as well. And in many ways, that's not the case. My dad will even admit he, you know, was a horrible husband and dealt with a lot and put my mom through a lot. But at the end of the day, he was a really good dad. And so just, you know, as a parent, when you're going through a divorce, to be able to have that sort of perspective of, you know, like, these children still need their parent. Their parent can still be there for them, even though their parent has hurt me, you know, so deeply. I think it's a very mature thought, but I think it's something that parents, you know, dealing with this sort of a situation need to strongly consider when they're thinking about what the other parent's role is going to be in their children's lives after a divorce. Yeah.
It's very insightful what you mentioned about the parent being able to understand that even though your ex-spouse was a horrible partner or horrible husband or wife, that does not necessarily mean they're going to be a horrible parent. So a lot of the motivation behind alienators' actions is a fear that their children might be affected similarly to, or hurt, as you said, similarly to the way they were. It's complex, as you know, and I'm so sorry, I have to say this. I want to just acknowledge that what you went through is absolutely terrible, and I'm so sorry that you had to experience that. No child should ever go through that. It's really, really difficult. And I want to ask you how this affected your other siblings, and please just tell us where the siblings all fit in, because you said you're one of 10 children, which is a nice large family.
Yes.
But you mentioned you were one of 5 children. Where do the others come into the picture?
Yeah, so I was actually one of 7. So my mom birthed 7 children, and then the other 3 are my step siblings. Okay. And later, my mom was able to get my stepdad to adopt us. And so legally, we're all one big family, but technically, I have 3 siblings that are not my own. Yeah.
All right, but you share the same father then?
Yeah. So we have our mother, and then she married our stepfather, who adopted us. Yeah.
Okay. All right. And tell us about the rest of the children. Were they experiencing the same alienation that you did for all those years?
Yeah, we all were alienated very very early on. Like I said, in the divorce process, there was, you know, sort of like a custody dispute that was happening. There's only so much I remember. But I do remember, you know, we would see him on certain days, and then all of a sudden we would only see him once a week. And so for most of the summer, it was just on Saturdays that we had access to him. I think the big difference was that my siblings weren't dealing with the same physical effects of the alienation as I was. And I had a very, very deep connection with my dad that is unique to my siblings. But they were all different ages when it was happening. So it's been interesting seeing them grow up and seeing what they remember and their relationship with our biological father, and how they've, you know, kind of reconnected. So currently I still have 3 of my youngest siblings living at home. Everyone else has moved out within the last 5 years. We've all just kind of left as soon as we were able to. Some of us before we even turned 18, because it's just not a very good environment for us to be in. It's gotten better, but, you know, it's not ideal. So my youngest brothers, they don't really remember much. They were toddlers at the time. My youngest brother had just turned 1 year old. So they didn't really experience a whole lot of that alienation, other than, you know, stuff that maybe their brain will remember, but they necessarily are not going to be conscious of that. My older sister, she was very, very mature for her age, and she was very strongly affected by it because my mom really engaged in certain adult behaviors with my sister, like, parentification. She would call my sister into her room, after we had all gone to bed at night, to tell her what was going on in court and to explain to her about the marriage and everything like that in a way that really she wasn't allowed to do. And so she was very negatively affected by it, specifically because when my mom was going through the divorce, we were the parents in our home. So we were actually living with some very good friends of ours. They had 9 children at the time, and at this time we only had 7. So there were 16 children under the age of 11 living in our one home, and we ran we ran the ship. We had a schedule. We stuck to our schedule. The youngest was a newborn at the time, and we were really active in the parenting of these kids, and in many ways their education, their physical well-being, keeping the house clean, making meals. I remember getting up at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning to make breakfast, and I was 10 years old. Should not have been doing that. That was not my responsibility.
Yes.
And so we were all very affected by the alienation, mostly because when my mom introduced our stepdad into the picture, we had only met him in person a couple of times before we moved in with them. And it was very difficult to go from being the parents to being children again, and trusting this person that we did not know with the well-being of our younger siblings who we cared so much about. And so I think a really big drawback to this whole, situation is when you have older kids and you have younger kids. The older kids are going to feel that responsibility over the younger kids, and they're not going to let go of that responsibility very easily. And so my older sister and myself have just a very intense relationship with our stepdad, because he came in going, I'm the parent, let me, control the situation. I'm in charge of this. It could even be something as simple as let me change the diaper. And my older sister was like, no, this is my job. I am the person that changes the diaper. You don't deal with this, because there was no trust that had been built beforehand. My mom was very quick. She wanted to get out of the situation as quickly as possible. She wanted to move on as quickly as possible. And she deals with some mental health issues herself. And so I don't blame her entirely for a lot of what happened. Obviously it was her decision and she's responsible for that. But I have the sort of understanding and empathy for the way that she reacted, because I know how she was raised and I know what she struggles with, internally. But it was just very detrimental to us to ask that much of us and then require us to give all of that up, and go back to becoming kids. You really can't do that. Once a child is put in a situation where they have to grow up very quickly and they're traumatized and they're coping, you can't just say, okay, everything's better now, go back to the way that you were, without any sort of understanding for what you're putting that child through. Yeah.
Yeah, that must also have been quite a dramatic change in your lives, as you're explaining.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, because of the alienation situation, were you aware of the reasons for your parents' breakup and the dynamics around them and their relationship that led to the divorce? Were you also privy to that as a child?
Yeah, I was aware of my mom's perspective on that, and she was the one that filed for divorce, so she tried to be kind of in the offensive position the entire time. I remember when she told us that they were getting a divorce, and she explained to us why. My 8-year-old sister was there with us. It was myself, my 8-year-old sister, and my 11-and-a-half-year-old sister, and we were the ones that were primarily, I guess, targeted in a way when it came to conversations about, the divorce. So I knew my mom's side of it. We were very sheltered. We were homeschooled. We were a Christian family. We weren't aware of a lot of the adult issues that kind of go into play when it comes to divorce. So she had her own little way of making it kind of child friendly in a way, but I was very emotionally mature at the time, and so I understood a lot more of what was going on than my younger sister did. But I remember just feeling very numb to it, and just I remember my sisters cried and I didn't, and I just kind of shut down emotionally, and I that actually I stayed very shut down throughout my like teen years, and it has only been recently that I've been able to kind of return to like that old self that I was before the divorce. So I know that I was very aware of what was going on. She walked me through every step of the way. There were some things that she would do in order to try and make him, my dad, look bad. Such as like bringing the kids to visitation without fresh diapers on, and then telling me to tell him that I was going to change the diaper and then not actually change it, so that the baby would end up with a diaper rash, and then my mom could then bring that to the court and say that he was neglecting us, things like that. That she was using us as kids as if we were tools in order to get her way in the court system. And so it was very, I mean, from May to September, to have your divorce start and then be finalized is, very, very quick. And it was the day after the divorce was finalized that she got married. So, so she wanted to be out of it. So she worked very strategically. She was like very, very intentional about everything. And if I was able to go into visitation, there was a reason. I was there to overhear a certain conversation and give that information back to her, or sabotage the situation in some way to make him look like a bad parent. And the way that she would just kind of rationalize that to me is just insane. Like she would almost convince me that it was true, even though I knew that it wasn't, because I was the one making a lot of those things happen. And so I knew that he wasn't doing it, but for some reason she was able to manipulate me in that way. Also with my health problems, she was able to say, oh, you're at first she would say, oh, you're feeling like this because you're thinking of him, which was true, because I missed him. And then that turned into, you're thinking of this, or you're feeling this because you're thinking of him, because you're scared of him, because he did this to you. And she would slowly start to, feed in that manipulation until it got to the point where I was afraid to be around him, and I was afraid to go to visitation with him, which was very devastating for him, of course, because, he loved me, and I'm his daughter, and he knows what I'm going through because of the health issues and everything. And so for him, that was very confusing as well.
Sure. So typically in alienation, it seems that from what you're telling us also, how you were specifically told and instructed to do certain things and to behave in certain ways. And it's all to set up a stage of events or behaviors in the other party to actually just strengthen their own argument. It's absolutely shocking what people do in the alienation process.
Yeah. And that's something that when we're looking at these groups online, on Facebook, that help parents that are going through this, something that I like to get on there and just remind parents of is that your child might be sending you hateful messages, but you have no idea what they're being told about you. And I have a personal rule with my younger siblings, because upon moving out, I was alienated from my younger siblings. So I consider that alienation, because I was a parental figure to my siblings in a way. I moved out, and I have not had extensive contact with them since leaving. And my mom even told me when I was moving out, you're going to abandon your siblings like your dad did. And she would use that manipulation to try and get me to stay. So my personal rule with my siblings is that anything that they say to me, any way that they treat me that I feel like is unfair or, rude, or, that hurts me, that I'm going to just brush it off, wait till they're out of the home, and then see what they have to say. Because everything that they're saying as a child, you know, I know the manipulation and I know their mindset, and I have a lot of understanding for that. I don't think that, you know, I would say 90% of what they're saying comes directly from the alienated parent. And so it's a lot of or alienator, I meant to say. So a lot of the alienated parents, like, they'll look at it and they'll go, oh, my child said this to me, that was so hurtful. How could they say that? How could they think that? Don't they remember, you know, these times that we had together? Don't they remember how good of a parent I was? The reality of it is that while they might remember, that's not at the forefront of their minds, because they're being fed this information and these lies from this other person. And you know what, even if they didn't believe what the alienator was saying, at the end of the day, they need to survive, and this is the environment that they're in. And the best way to do that is to get on the good side of the parent that is the scariest, in a way, you know. And if you're going to be healthy, you know, you have to be okay with the child not being, you know, your best friend all the time, because there are other people that's scarier.
And that's very important. What you mentioned is that alienated children will go to great lengths to appease the alienator or the alienating parent, just so that they can be safe in the environment where they are, because they have no choice. They're stuck there and they can't get away from it. So they will try their best to get in as safe a position as possible. And that's what is so difficult for them. And that's what very important that the alienated parents need to understand, is that that is what's happening. And I love what you said, that you have a personal rule for yourself to brush it aside and literally not take it personally, as hard as it might be. It's tragic to me that you were alienated from your father and that you are alienated again from your siblings. It's like a cycle that is repeating.
It most definitely is. And I can't say for sure anything, because my mom isn't diagnosed with any sort of a mental health disorder. There is a very high likelihood that if she ever got tested, that she would be. Her brother has some issues, and her father also had some issues, and they were both diagnosed. And so I could see that, you know, coming into play. But I can say that she exhibits very strong narcissistic tendencies. This isn't like your basic, like, oh, they can be a bit selfish, or like, oh, like, I don't like some of the opinions that they have. It's not that sort of, you know, narcissist language that we like kind of like to throw around, especially my generation of people. We throw words around trauma, and narcissists are both of those, you know, that I think aren't taken as seriously. But I can genuinely say that my mother is the type of abuse that she put us under would fall under the definition of narcissistic abuse. She's incredibly manipulative, and it is very, very difficult to even have your own mindset around her. You cannot have any autonomy whatsoever. She went from being a very, like, you know, reasonable parent to incredibly strict. Every minute of our day was planned out. And we, you know, I couldn't take longer than like a 5-minute shower more than once a week. And I had to ask specifically for that, to get that 5-minute shower in. So there was a time that I did leave for a couple of weeks. I had a short-term internship. When I returned home, I was tired. I was hungry. I had a red-eye flight. And it was, you know, I was jet lagged, and I wasn't allowed to eat. I wasn't allowed to sleep, and I wasn't allowed to shower, because I had, you know, when I had arrived at home, I missed breakfast. It was in the middle of the day, and it wasn't on my shower day. And that was something that was really crazy to me. I was like, wait, like, that was when I started to realize this doesn't seem right. It doesn't seem like I'm allowed to attend to my own needs as an individual. And then I started to realize even my, you know, opinions were controlled. So as a child of an alienator, you cannot have your own opinions. You can't even think it. She would tell me, I know you better than you know yourself. I know what you're thinking. I can read you. I was afraid to even question her, like, in my mind. So I couldn't even entertain the thought that she might be lying or manipulative, because in reality, you know, She couldn't see that. She couldn't control my emotions, but I didn't know that. I thought that she was in full control of all of that. And even then, because she is incredibly religious, she would use religion in a way, like if she felt like we were lying about something, she would say, well, I'm going to pray to God and ask him if you're lying. And if he tells me that you are, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. So she kind of had this God complex in a way. She would act like she was best friends with God, and that he would talk to her and he would tell her what I was thinking and he would tell her what I was feeling. And I was incredibly afraid to, even think about my dad.
Yes, I can just imagine how terrifying that must be for a child.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it was awful. I think she went a little overboard sometimes. I don't think she needed to do that much to, bring us onto her side of things. But there were some certain things where I remember one time I looked my biological dad up on the internet. I think it was Pinterest even, because that was the only social media I knew about at the time. And I was 14. And so incredibly sheltered. But I remember we were matching socks, because that's what you do when you have that many siblings. You spend lots and lots of hours trying to find the matches to all of the socks. So we were all sitting in a circle, and I whispered to someone like, oh, I looked him up on Pinterest and I found his account. And I remember being in a lot of trouble for that, because he was irrelevant in our life at that point. We hadn't seen him in 4 years. He was irrelevant. But she did her best she says she was trying to protect us from him, but I know that she was actually just trying to protect herself from him, because I know that if we had some sort of like custody situation, she would still have to see him once a week, until my youngest brother is, I want to say he's 14, just turned 14. Maybe he just turned 13. I can't remember. I haven't seen him in a while. But she has at least 4 years until, she would be able to fully cut, her ex out of her life. And that's a scary thought for her, so she just wanted to move on. And yeah, you're right. She does have a cycle of alienation. Yeah, it's unfortunate.
Wow. Sure. Hannah, you did mention when you returned after being away for a while, you started realizing that your thoughts were controlled and that your behavior wasn't you said you weren't allowed to take care of your own needs. I wanted to ask, was there something specific that happened, or was it a series of events, or just the culmination of things that made you realize that this is alienation? When did you reach that point, and how?
So I didn't fully, I didn't have a name for it. It's kind of a lesser known thing. And like you said at the very beginning, a lot of people don't think that it's, a reality. And so it's very difficult at first to learn about it if no one's talking about it. It's kind of taboo. But I did start to see, I guess, the toxicity of the environment that I was in at that time. And it was right when I got back that I realized, and it was mostly because after that, that morning when I had gotten home, that evening we had like an annual church party that we always would do. And it was like a harvest party. It was something we always did in the fall. And usually at this sort of a situation, usually what would happen is that all the guys would drink way too much, and then we would have to wait for them to, kind of let the alcohol wear off so we could all go home. And so that's one night a week that we would be out of the house until like 1:30 in the morning. And I was incredibly jet lagged. I was in Hawaii actually, so very large time difference for me to kind of deal with, and it was my first time ever traveling. And so I didn't, I wasn't feeling very well at all. I didn't sleep on the flight. I didn't eat. And then I had to go and socialize, which I'm good. I'm chatty, but I'm not really good with larger groups of people. And so that was something that I was really insecure about, and I didn't want to go. So I went anyways, and I was nauseous, so I didn't eat while we were there. We finally got home at around 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning, and I begged my mom to let me make an egg. So she finally let me fry an egg. So I sat and I was eating my egg, and my stepdad walks in with a giant book. It was about that thick, and it was a religious book that he had been reading while I was gone. And he came and sat next to me and wanted to tell me all about all the things he had been reading. And I was spacing out. I was incredibly tired. I did the math before. It had been like 2 full days since I had slept. So I was incredibly tired. I was exhausted. It was the first I had eaten in those 2 days. And I just wanted to eat my egg, drink some water, and go to bed. And so I was spacing out, and he could tell I wasn't listening, and he got very frustrated at me. And we were not allowed to talk back or anything. If they told us to do something, we had to say, yes, mom, or yes, dad. They were very, very strict with that. And so I was struggling to be a good kid and to, be listening to him. And I was 18 at the time. So technically I was, an adult, and I could make my own decisions. But the way that they raised us was that because I'm a woman, I'm not actually, I don't have the right to, basically I can be treated as a child until I'm married. And then the authority goes to my husband. And so my stepdad still had authority over me. So there was nothing I could do. I couldn't leave. And the result of the situation was him and my mom yelling at me. And I was obviously crying because I was exhausted and like just so done, wanted to leave. Mm-hmm. And after about 45 minutes of just this back and forth, I walked away. Like I just turned around and I walked away and I went to bed. And because of that, I ended up in church discipline and all this stuff. But it was on my way to my bedroom where I was like, this is not a good place for me to be. This is not healthy. This is not safe. If they're not even recognizing when I need to go to sleep or when I need to eat or when I need to shower. I'm 18 years old. I should know for myself. I don't even know for myself when I'm, Yes. I'm very sorry about my cat. She's very loud today. She needs to get spayed. But yeah, so it's just, that was kind of when I realized, oh, this is not safe. I need to get out. And so that was, I think it was in September, the very end of September, maybe October. And then I officially left at the beginning of January. So I had wanted to come back to spend the holidays with my family, but it was met with a lot of manipulation. My mom would sit down with me and she would say, if you leave, you will not be loved. You will not be allowed to come home. You will be you'll be living in sin and you're going to go to hell. And to this day, I saw my brother again after 3 years, and my youngest brother, and the first thing he says to me is, why does my mom think you're going to hell? Wow. And it was just, it tore my heart out because it's the first time I've seen him in years. It's my baby brother. And first of all, he said, my mom, as if we didn't have the same parents. And that was a huge red flag to me because I was like, wow, he doesn't even see me as a part of the family. He doesn't see us as having the same parents. But also that he was fed that information that I'm going to hell, that I'm somehow living this very, very terrible life. And I'm not. I work with kids, I moved to Florida, so I own a mobile swim school. So I teach kids how to survive in the water, and I'm very passionate about it. And I never got into any substance abuse or anything like that. So if you look at, just on paper, it looks like I'm doing very, very well. So it was very confusing to me that anyone would think that I'm, going to hell because of moving out, because I left home. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
But that fits the narrative that she's been creating all these years.
Exactly. Wow. Yeah.
What a story. What a story. Can you tell us how you reconnected with your dad? How did you manage to do that? And what was that like after all those years?
So I reached out to him on Facebook, actually. I found his account. I reached out to him. within 5 minutes, I had a response. He was ready.
Wow. Yeah.
And I think the first thing that I noticed that was very different was that he was not willing to engage in any sort of negative talk about my mom. He didn't want to, he said he would be there and answer questions if I had questions, but it was not his intent to defend himself or to prove himself right or anything like that. He was just happy to be able to have a conversation with me. So one of the first things that he did actually was he bought me a phone. So originally I had only had a smartphone for a couple of months. Before then I had to have like a flip phone, because very strict family. And my mom uses Android, and she has found ways to track everything. So she could even see, like, I wasn't even on the phone plan anymore, and she could still see what apps I had and things like that. And so I was incredibly paranoid that she was going to find out that I was talking to him. It wasn't even that bad of a thing, you know, but I was so scared she was going to find out. And so he got me, I switched to Apple, and all of the issues with that, you know, was a full stop. So that was one of the first things that he did for me, and which I really, really appreciated. And then we talked very frequently. I think maybe 2 months later, we talked on the phone. I could be wrong about the timeline of that. But we talked on the phone, and then it felt like we were just kind of going back to how it was before. He and I were really close when I was younger. And so obviously my age had changed and his situation had changed. And so there was a little bit of a different dynamic there. But for the most part, it was very much the same. And I felt really, really happy to have my dad back.
Wow, that sounds wonderful.
Yeah.
I'm so glad and so grateful that you did manage to reconnect with your dad. So many alienated children don't get that chance.
Yeah.
So it's absolutely wonderful and something to be celebrated. And I wanted to ask you, you mentioned that your dad said he was not there to defend himself or to, you know, criticize your mom. How does it feel at that stage? You were 18. How do you deal with that? The vast difference between how your mother treats the situation and communicates with you and how your father did is completely different between your two parents. How do you deal with that? Because I know that I have spoken to a number of young people who at some stage realize that alienation is at play. And it's quite hard for many of them to reach that point where they reconnect with the alienated parent. Some feel guilty, some feel ashamed that they didn't realize what was going on, or that they maybe didn't understand it or see through the lies and the manipulation. How was it for you when you realized, okay, Dad is playing a totally different game? And I don't mean as if he's manipulating, but he's just behaving differently and handling the whole situation completely different. That must be quite difficult to deal with.
Yeah, I think at first I still filtered it through my mom's lens. So one thing that my mom would always say, and this is something that's very interesting, and I think I've seen it a lot with a lot of alienation situations involving people with narcissistic traits, where they will take the truth and they will tell you enough of the truth that when they start to twist it, it seems very, very realistic, and it seems like, you know, like, yeah, that makes sense. So one of the things that my mom would tell me is that he was a very boyish person, just in the sense that he didn't really man up ever. He kind of had a weak, you know, backbone when it came to, you know, certain things. He didn't like to talk about anything too serious. He was just not a very strong-willed person, just not very masculine in a way. And so when that was first happening, I was like, oh, you're exactly like she said that you were. You won't stand up for me. You won't, you know, you're not going to protect me. She protected me. She was fierce in the way that she protected me, but you seem like you're more neutral. And so a lot of the things that my mom had said originally, when I was growing up, they started to ring true when I was in a relationship with with my dad, and we were still kind of working some things out. And I gotta say, like, I had a lot of just moments of feeling like, oh, my mom was right. This is not going to work out. This person is toxic. This person is scary. This person's going to hurt me. He's evil. And, or I'm going to hell because I'm communicating with him, because it's like fraternizing with the devil, essentially. It was to that level with my mom. And so I felt incredibly guilty that I was talking to him, because I believed I was sinning. I believed I was I wasn't following what God wanted me to do. And so in a way, like, I had to be okay with disobeying God. And that was a very hard thing for me to like process as well, because I was always very like good about, being the better Christian in a way. And so I was very nervous at the beginning. And then I started to see those traits as being just unproblematic. It's not that he's being, it's not that he's not being a man. He's just being unproblematic, because this is something that happened to him, and this is something that he had to come to terms with. But I think the main thing that helped me to kind of see from his perspective was that he and I both share a very strong love for poetry. So I used to have an account on I believe it was called Poetry Soup, this website, and my mom would let me write poetry and post it on there. And it was very it was really special. I was allowed to do that. Because we weren't allowed to really have a lot of access to electronics, but my mom favored me in a way. I think it was because she just really grasped onto a relationship with me, because I had been so close to my dad in the past. And so I was allowed to post here, and my dad actually was snooping around online, and he found it. And so he started writing poetry. And so when we reconnected, he shared with me some of the poetry that he had written about the situation. And so I was able to see how he felt about it, and just kind of his perspective, without him having to attack my mom in any way or cause me to like manipulate me. And I realized like, oh, he's just presenting me information. He's just presenting his side of the story. He's not trying to control how I'm thinking about it. That's the difference. And I started to see that my mom it wasn't her telling me, what happened. It was her convincing me about what happened. It was her trying to change my mind about it. Whereas my dad was more like, well, I love you and I want you to see from my perspective, but you can come up with whatever conclusion you want to come up with. I just want you to make an informed decision. And so I started to realize like, oh, that actually seems like a healthier version of, the situation. And I had some really good friends that were kind of, with me, along the way, that were pointing out some of those things and being like, that actually doesn't make him sound like he's such a bad person. That actually isn't a bad trait. I know you've been told that's a bad trait, but it's not. And so at around the same time, my relationship with my mom and my stepdad kind of started to fall, and my relationship with my dad started to, become more of a priority. And so I could see that contrast between the bad behaviors of my mom and the good behaviors of my dad. And so I think it took about a year after we started talking that I did go, and he flew me out and I was able to visit him. And it was very like uncomfortable and awkward. And, I wanted to leave so bad. But after that, it was a lot better. And so it took about a year for us to go from, first communication to, visiting with each other. And then it became more frequent once I moved away from Hawaii and I was living on the mainland again. I was seeing him every 3 to 6 months. I was going over and visiting him. And then this past winter, I stayed with him for a longer period of time, a few months. I stayed at his home. So we're very close now, but it did take a little bit to, get there.
I'm so happy for both of you and for your whole family. And I'm hoping that the two of you who are reconciling and becoming closer will have a positive impact on the rest of your siblings and his relationship with them also. Hannah, you mentioned that when you reunited with your father, you basically switched parents. So now you are not in contact with your mom. How does that feel after everything that's happened and all the insight that you've gained in the situation? Because I can hear you have an incredible understanding of your mother's character and personality traits and what moved her to behave the way she did, which is admirable. I must commend you for that. It seems as if you've done a lot of work around it or done a lot of research around it.
Yeah.
So I can see how you understand it. But how does it feel deep down? What is the emotions around that? Being the child who was treated like this by one parent for so long, and if I may use the word, almost punished, now that you've uncovered the truth and changed your own situation for the better, you're still paying for it.
Yeah.
So to
yeah,
speak.
I think it's I think I have a lot of empathy for my mom, like I said before, because I know that she's dealing with a lot mentally that she really can't control at the moment. It's not a conscious decision of her. Like a lot of what she's doing is based off of some very, very deep insecurities. And I actually came to a realization a few months ago that perhaps my mom was also alienated as a child. When her parents divorced, what I know is that she was living in California at the time, and her dad moved to Colorado almost as soon as the divorce happened. And unfortunately, he died shortly after the divorce was finalized because of a seizure. But her brother had been begging their mom to go live with him, and the mom would refuse. Can't go live with him. He's a bad person. And in reality, they had just gotten a divorce. It happens. And it was right when she had finally agreed that that my mom's dad had passed away, and so her brother never got to be reunited with his dad, and that was something that he was really, really, wanting and needing. And so I wonder if that you've heard the term hurt people hurt people.
Yes.
And it's one of those situations where I see where she was hurt, and I see how her thought process around divorce and how that works might have been just kind of developed. And so I can see why she made the decisions that she made. It doesn't excuse the selfish behavior that she has now. And at the time, it was very, very difficult for me to come to terms with. But I think one of the most beautiful things about the way that our brains are designed and our mind and the way that all that works is that our mind will protect us from the things that had happened. And so I didn't realize a lot of those things all at once. It was a gradual healing. So I would remember something that maybe I hadn't remembered before, or, be able to fully process a memory. And then that would hurt, and I would heal from that. And then once I was healed from that, my mind would give me something else that needed to be processed. And so I think just having that gradual, healing process. I'm not healed yet. I've only just started therapy. So I have my first actual appointment next week. So I haven't done any therapy or anything, which I know will help me a lot. So I'm not fully healed yet, but I think that I am at a point where I can look at it in a very logical way. And I can see how that worked for my mom, and how she did not have that healing. She got married very young. She had her first child when she was 19. And I didn't really fully realize what had happened to me until I was 20. So I can imagine not having that time to heal and to recover from a difficult childhood might have, had something to do with the way that she treated us. So I know that I'm dealing with the long-term effects of that trauma, but I think it's more than just my mom, and her decisions and her pain that she caused me, but it's the pain that her mother and father caused her. And, I don't know their stories, but I know that my grandmother's parents had, some very similar, not parental alienation, but some very, very similar situations that happened. And I can see the generational pattern. So it's bigger than my mom. And so I can't fully blame her for, you know, the long-term effects of my situation, because I think she's also dealing with the same long-term effects of her situation. It would not be my place to fully blame her for that.
Well, yeah, like I said earlier, it's incredible the understanding and empathy that you have with your mother, because it's very true that we inherit programming from our parents that they inherited from their parents, and it literally goes back generations. And most of that we repeat unless we break the cycles and do some deep personal work to learn and grow so we can behave differently or do better. So yes, I take my hat off to you for having all that understanding and insight in the situation. Was there ever a time where you felt angry or resentful towards your mother?
There have been moments, I think, specifically when I remember something, and I remember the time that was taken from me.
Mm,
Specifically when my mom would be taking us to visitation. So we got a court order that if I didn't want to go to visitation, I didn't have to. And I was not in any way forced to go see my dad. She
mhm,
would take us to go see him, and she would say, Hannah, are you gonna go with dad today? And I would say, yeah, we're gonna go do this fun thing. And
mm,
she would say, oh, but don't you want to go to Panera Bread? Panera Bread was my favorite restaurant at the time. I loved the broccoli soup. So she would say, I'll take you to Panera Bread and we can have a mom and daughter time. And I can buy you some soup and you can listen to your favorite song. And I would pick a song and I would listen to it over and over and over again. I just recently got diagnosed with ADHD. So like it's,
mhm,
it's very evident that I was hyperfixating on certain songs. Um, and they were all sad songs too. And so I think it's reflective of my, you know, mental health at
mm,
the time, just not being so good. Um, then I would be like, oh yeah, I kind of want to do that instead. I would way rather do that than tote around my four little brothers all day, you know, with my dad. I would way rather come with you and have a mom daughter time. And looking back on that, I just think it's so cruel. I felt like she didn't provide for us all throughout the week. She wasn't home. I never saw her. She would just kind of hide in her room, or she would be gone and leave us with the kids for days on end. And so I had to choose between spending time with my mom and spending time with my dad. And I think that I don't think that was a very fair situation for her to put me in, and make me choose. And obviously, she was trying to make me choose to hang out with her instead.
mhm, mhm,
And and it just feels like kind of stolen time in a way, because those were the last weeks that I saw my dad until you know, we had been alienated. And so she really stole that from me, and she took, you know, a relationship from me. And so sometimes I get a little bit upset about that. And it more just feels like a pity, like, oh, that sucks, because that was my life. And not only was that my life, and I look at it, I kind of try and separate myself from it, and because I work with kids, and I go, that was a child. That was
mhm,
not fair for that to happen to that child or those children, because there were seven of us. Um, there was a lot of injustice, and I can be angry for the younger version of myself not getting the care and the love that she needed, and you know, being torn from her dad in that way. Like I can be upset about that. But and there were times that I was angry, like I would just be thinking about it and I would just be shaking with how angry I was at, you know, what she had
mm,
done.
mhm,
But they were very brief moments, because I think I'm so analytical about it as well. And so I allowed myself to feel angry or to feel sad or to feel whatever feeling that I needed to feel. And then I would write poetry. I would write a poem about it,
mm,
and then I would kind of process it, and then, you know, I didn't act on the anger. I didn't reach out to her. I didn't, you know, send her angry messages. I have a sister who's more on that line. She likes to send the angry messages. It's not really
mhm.
been my thing. Um, so yeah, there were times that I was angry, but I didn't really do very much about it, because I didn't think it would help. I was never allowed to be angry at my mom, so that was also I was angry at myself for being angry at her. So there's just a lot of complexity within it that there is just nothing I could think of to do about it because I didn't know what the right thing was.
Yeah. Interesting. So, Hannah, thank you so much for sharing your story. It's a very sad story, but there's light at the end of the tunnel, and I'm so grateful that you managed to come this far. And I hope that there's going to be similar resolution for your siblings as well. Can I ask you, you spoke earlier about your health. This has had a tremendous impact on you. Apart from the emotional impact of alienation, it has directly affected your health.
Yeah.
Where do you stand on that? I'm sure you have a lot of stuff to deal with. And you also mentioned there are things that you will probably never recover from.
Yeah.
How do you deal with all of that going forward?
I'm not really sure how I deal with all of that. I'm kind of still in the process of working through that. And getting a diagnosis for some things. I just got some diagnoses, this past week, and I've got, I think, one more that I'm kind of looking toward, and then after that we can figure out what the next plan is. But what I'm dealing with is chronic, so it is something that I'm going to be dealing with for the rest of my life. It's not going to get better. It will probably just get worse as I age. And there are some other things as well, like we were malnutrition for a long time growing up. My mom had me on some very, very strict diets as a teen. Before I even was overweight or anything, she had me on, I could only eat a meal a day, and I had to eat very, very small, restrictive portions of very specific kinds of food.
Wow.
And my sister, who was on it, we weren't allowed to have sugar, so she would secretly go and buy like sugar-free like candies. And if you know anything about the sugar replacements in those, they can be very, very dangerous to your health. And so she's dealing with her own set of issues that are, a result of, just, a lot of gut health with her. And and my older sister as well. I think I'm the only sister in my family who eats gluten and sugar. Like everyone else, they can't have it because of just how our bodies have been ravaged by, the way that we were raised and what we were fed or not fed growing up. And I think I have, I'm very I have a lot of self-preservation. So I'm very resilient. I can deal with it. I can push through it. But it's also very, sometimes if you can't cry and laugh, and sometimes I'll joke about it a little bit and be like, why? Like why out of all the things, not only did you have to, make my childhood very difficult, but you also had to make it to where I can't even escape the difficult childhood that I had. And it's incredibly difficult because when I'm having a hard day, I have some days where I just can't get out of bed until, noon because I'm so sick. I feel terrible and I can't work. So sometimes I can't make what I need to make in order to survive. I can't go hang out with friends, or I'm a very bubbly, active person, and I can't do a lot of the physical things that I want to be able to do. And so I do have a little bit of a resentment for that, and just kind of not having a relationship with her is very helpful because I look at it more of what she did to me was terrible and was absolutely not okay. There's no excuse for that. But after I've grown up, if I continue to allow myself to be hurt by her, knowing what I know, a lot of that is on me. And so that's why I, haven't pursued a relationship with her after I've moved out. But unfortunately, I cannot fully prevent myself from being hurt by her long term because this is something that is going to follow me for the rest of my life. And it's a very, very hard pill to swallow. And on my bad days, it's even harder because, I will blame her for it. I'm like, this is your fault. This is, I can't have a high quality of life because of what you've done. But I think there's also a flip side to it where because of what I've been through, I have an intense amount of or an insane amount of empathy for people who have gone through these things. And the friends that I have, the community that I built here, I wouldn't have if I hadn't experienced the things that I had experienced. And the amount of resilience that I have, I wouldn't have been able to develop if I wasn't physically restricted, you know, so much. And so I think I can glean, you know, the good side of a lot of those things from it. What happened wasn't okay, but it's how I got here, and I really like where I am now. So so yeah, it's a double-edged sword for sure. But, I'm still growing and I'm still working through it, and I probably will never fully heal, you know, mentally. Physically, I definitely won't. But hopefully I can, you know, learn some more things and make my experience, you know, with life, you know, a little bit more improved, just as time goes on.
And that's so beautifully said. I love how you sharing with us how much you've learned and how much you've grown. And that's what is so beautiful about what I do with my Get Up and Grow initiative is exactly that. Life knocks us down and we have no choice but to get up and learn from it and grow. And that is what you have done, and that is what you are doing. And I think it's absolutely beautiful that you are doing that. It shows strength and courage, because that's what it takes to move forward after what you've experienced and what you've been through. It's absolutely harrowing. So in closing, Hannah, what advice can you give to other children or young people who are in similar situations?
I would say spend as much time on your own as you can to think about things that are going on. Don't just, you know, talk to one person and allow them to create a narrative for you. It's not one of those situations. So I'm not saying trust no one. That's not at all what I'm saying. Find the people that you trust, but continue to reassess what your opinion is. So one of the things that I thought growing up was that my opinion was going to be my opinion for the rest of my life. I'm like, oh, well, this is a core belief. This is what I believe about this. And one thing I've learned is that those change, and it's okay when your core beliefs change. When something that you used to stand for, maybe you don't really stand for that anymore. And it can be scary because you might feel like you're losing your morals in a way. But you're building stronger, more mature morals. And so it's important to allow your mind to be changed. If that is, you know, something that you're feeling, don't push against it. Spend time alone, spend time thinking about these things, and just do the next right thing for you. Don't think about it in this giant, you know, scheme of things like, what is this going to look like in 20 years? That's way too overwhelming. And we're not made to, you know, think that largely, you know. Do the next right thing for you, do the next healthiest thing for you, and everything will kind of fall into place.
Wonderful, beautiful. I have one more question for you, if I may.
Yeah. Of course.
Have you ever confronted your mother with this, used the name alienation or called it that?
I don't think that I have, not directly to her. She did once. She made a group chat when she found out that I was speaking with my dad, because I didn't tell her. She found out through one of my sisters. And so she very immediately created a group chat with my sisters and I to kind of basically say, I'm sorry that I was such a good parent, sort of situation. I'm so sorry that that I did what was best for you. And so it was just, you know, some backhanded apologies there. And within my response, I didn't really respond to her. I responded to my sisters, and I said, I broke down the apology, and I said, you know, this is why I don't have a relationship with her. This is why this apology is not valid and doesn't make sense to me. And I did tell them this is called parental alienation, what we were put through, and you know, we need to hold her accountable to that. So she was in the group chat and she could see it, but I was directing my language toward my sisters, who of course everyone just kind of blew up the chat and no one likes the person that has everything to say about it. You know,
Yes.
we want all the followers involved. So yeah, and you know, I think she knows that it's a thing, and she probably deep down knows that it applies to her. But it's just not something that she's willing to really focus on. And because of her, you know, personality traits, she's most likely not going to, you know, turn around one day and be like, oh, I'm so sorry. Like, I pray that we have that sort of a reconciliation. But I also am very realistic about it. It's probably not going to happen. So in order to have a relationship with her, I probably have to sacrifice, you know, myself, my morals, and my health in order to do that. And that's just not something I'm willing to do.
Yeah, or can afford to do at this stage.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, thank you so much for that, Hannah. I think I wish we could speak for another hour. It's heartwarming to hear your story. As much as it breaks my heart, it gives me joy and gratitude also to hear your story and how far you've come. And again, I want to just acknowledge the hardship that you went through that no child deserves. And also, I want to congratulate you on everything that you've done, and the work and the learning and the growing that you have done. Please
Thank you so
keep it up.
much.
Yeah.
I will, for sure.